So recently the government has come up and said that they'll be providing minimum support price on certain crops. So do you think there are any flaws with the existing regime of MSP? If yes, why? And if no, why not?
One of the common demands made by the farmer organizations in the recent times has been higher MSP for crops. If you look at the recent protest carried out by the farmers across the country, the most common demand which they make is that this MSP should be hiked for almost all the crops. In particular, they demand the implementation of the recommendations of the National Commission for Farmers on MSP fixation. Let me give you a very brief background about this NCF, that is National Commission for Farmers. This commission was constituted in the year 2004, exactly November 2004, under the chairmanship of the eminent agricultural scientist Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, and that is why this commission is popularly known as Dr. M.S. Swaminathan Commission. The committee recommended that MSP should be at least 50% more than the weighted average cost of production. According to Commission for Agricultural Costs and Prices, that is CSCP, which is the official body which fixes MSP every year, the cost of production can be defined in 4 different ways. That means there are 3 different categories through which the cost of production of crops in India is defined. One is A2 and other is A2 plus FL. Here FL stands for family labor, and the third one is C2, which is a comprehensive cost of production. So what is this A2? It actually includes all the expenses incurred by the farmers, both in cash and kind, on inputs like seeds, fertilizer, pesticides, chemicals, hired labor, and whatever included under it. And it also includes rent paid for leased land, interest on working capital, and depreciation on implements and farm buildings. So this is what we call A2. And A2 plus FL includes A2 cost plus an imputed value of unpaid family labor, because farmers many times employ family labor to conduct farming activities, and this is also included under the second definition of cost of production. And why? Because some costs are not actually incurred by the farmers, but they are imputed. They have to be imputed for various purposes and to get an idea about the structure of the cost. And coming to the C2, which is a comprehensive definition of cost of production, it includes A2 plus FL plus the interest paid by the farmers on the value of owned capital asset other than land, and the rental value of owned land net of land revenue, which means that C2 includes anything above A2 and FL. So what does the farmers demand? They demand that MSP should be fixed 50% more than the C2 cost. So which means that they want the government to use the overall cost of production, that means the comprehensive definition of cost of production for fixing the MSP.
In that case, why is the government so hesitant in using the C2 cost for fixing the MSP?
In the present system, the MSP is fixed based on A2 plus FL, but the farmers demand that C2 should be used. Based on the present system, the government has agreed, in the last budget which was announced, and very recently the government has actually increased the MSP of many crops based on A2 plus FL cost, which means that the government has agreed for a hike in MSP to at least 1.5 times production cost, which is defined as A2 plus FL. What is the government's point of view? That means why the government is not willing to implement the C2 cost. The government says that it is impractical for policy implementation. Why? Because the C2 includes costs that are never paid by the farmers, or at least majority of the farmers. And the land rental cost, which is a part of the C2, is too diverse across the country, which means that if you include that, it will complicate the calculation of C2 cost. It's very difficult to arrive at a uniform cost calculation. And the government is particularly concerned about the adverse consequence of an increase in MSP on food price inflation and fiscal deficit. In fact, these two concerns are not openly stated by the government to the reasons best known to the government. There is actually an evidence to support this concern, and if you look at the available evidence, especially in the context of food grains, it is very clear that procurement by the government at a higher MSP translates into higher market prices of food grains. Why? Because it sets a higher benchmark price in the market. Second, when the government procures food from the market at a higher MSP price, it can edge out the private trade because it can actually wipe out a major part of the food which is available in the market, because government procures the food and it reduces the quantum of food products available for consumption. And if you want evidence on this, I can give a small statistics to substantiate this point. In my recent research, I found that the wholesale price inflation rate of food articles and food products averaged 10.07% and 6.30% respectively during the 10-year period from June 2004 to May 2014. In contrast, the average food price inflation rate was very low between the period from June 2014 and September 2018, that is 2.92 and 2.47 respectively for food articles and food products. That means if you look at the last 5 years, the average food price inflation is considerably low compared to the previous 10 years. And if you measure the growth rate of MSP during these two periods, interestingly you find that the MSP of majority of the farm products grew at a very low rate after 2014-15 compared to the period from 2004-5 to 2013-14. To me, it seems that by learning lessons from the experience between 2004 and 2014 in managing the food prices, the government has restrained the growth of MSP between 2014 and 18 with the sole objective of keeping food prices under control.
So then, based on this discussion, do you think that giving a base MSP is an effective policy instrument?
The point is that if you look at the studies, they are clearly shown that other than paddy and wheat, let me make it very clear, other than paddy and wheat, this MSP is not implemented in case of other crops. Which means, yes, in response to your question, I can say that it has worked effectively only for paddy and wheat. The point is, the MSP is announced for many crops, but at the ground level, they are not enforced effectively through official procurement of such crops at the announced MSP. The point is, the government merely announces the higher MSP, but when it comes to procurement, the government is not very effective. And I can give two examples. One is the case of pulses and other is oil seeds. The procurement of oil seed and pulses by the state agencies has been very little due to, first of all, the government doesn't have insufficient procurement infrastructure, and second, the government doesn't have enough storage facility to store whatever the government is able to buy. And due to these two reasons, there is a relative bias against procurement of crops other than wheat and rice, and which means that from the point of view of farmers, what is more important is implementation of MSP announced by the government, and the method of fixation comes next.
So what are ways other than giving MSP that we can use to improve farmer welfare?
Basically, I think in the today's discussion on agrarian crisis, there are a lot of emphasis on MSP and loan waivers, and I don't think other than these any other issues are brought in, at least in the public discussion. From that point of view, I have few suggestions to improve the welfare of the farmers. That means suggestions to improve the welfare of the farmers other than MSP. When we need to provide non-income based support to the farmers. Today in the discussion on agrarian crisis, people talk about only income based support like loan waivers or MSP. But what about this non-income based support? For example, what about providing farmers and their families free and quality education and health services? Because if you all know that if a disease comes in the family of the farmer, their entire income gets wiped out because of that. Also, they need to spend a lot of money for their children's education and health care. So which means that if you provide this kind of facilities in a quality manner, then I think it can reduce the cost of living of the farmers considerably, and nobody talks about that. Then we need to improve the quality of rural infrastructure, and including the market yards and roads and many other infrastructure facilities which are required for the farmers to not only to produce food but also to transport it to the urban markets. And we need to actually improve the quality of agricultural extractive services, because if you interact with the farmers, they will tell that the government bureaucracy is completely helpless in helping the farmers, at least in majority of the states, to give them enough scientific advice to cultivate a crop. and because of that, farmers depend mostly on the private traders. That means when they go and buy fertilizer in a shop, they get advice from them. When they buy pesticide, they advise from the shop owner, and which means that the bureaucracy is not that effective to help the farmers. And that means we need to strengthen the agricultural extension services, and we need to provide scientific support, and also we need to provide agriculture inputs including farm credit. If it is very difficult to provide non-income based support because of the limitations of the government machinery, the best thing we can solve the issue is by providing efficient direct cash or income support to the farmers. That means you just transfer the cash to the farmers directly rather than providing various facilities to the farmers. And for example, recently the Telangana state has introduced a scheme called Raitu Bandhu scheme. In that, they distributed checks to the farmers at the rate of rupees 4,000 per acre of land owned without compromising on other subsidies or transfers. Which means that simply you transfer a lump sum amount to each farmer, and that can take care of most of the problems of the farmers. And most importantly, we need to expand job opportunities in and around rural areas to boost farmers' earnings, because farming is a cyclical job, which means that only during that season you actually indulge in farming, but in the rest of the time actually the farmers are free and their family members are free. So in that case, we need to create other job opportunities so that they can earn additional income. And to give some examples, why don't we promote export-oriented food processing industry, and we can promote farm or village tourism, because India has a huge potential as far as tourism is concerned. So why don't we focus on that? Why don't we promote foreign investment in tourism? We need to attract rural educated youth to agriculture. If you look at the average age of farmers and agricultural workers in India, it is around 50 years. And whereas in many other fields you find youngsters are ruling the entire scenario. But in case of agriculture, we see that the people who are at the age of 50, they are doing farming and other activities. So which means we need to attract more of our abundant young population. And one more thing which we have been ignoring for quite some time is that social learning. That means why don't we use the successful farmers as these change agents, and this we call it as social learning. And the point is that there are many successful farmers and agri-ventures which are around us. For example, sometime before, the central government has released a document called Harvest of Hope, which actually contained the story of 101 farmers across the country. The point is that you have to identify more such farmers and use them as change agents to inspire the farmers and to change their farm practice, and mainly to inspire them to change or enhance their farming skills. And like in any other field, people look for inspiration or models to emulate, and I don't think agriculture is different from that point of view. And basically we did this strategy, or we worked out the strategy quite efficiently during Green Revolution, which means to propagate the idea of Green Revolution, we actually promoted the success stories of successful farmers among the various farmers, and through that they learned from each other. But unfortunately today, if you look at the entire scenario is covered by only distress or negative stories about the farmers or farmer suicides, and I don't think we have enough space, or we are to discuss about the positive stories or success stories about the farmers. We need to make state governments accountable. Why? Because India is a federal country and agriculture is a state subject under Indian constitution. And if you look at the data, it's very clear that a major part of the budgetary expenditure on agriculture in India is borne by the states. For example, the 2016-17 data shows that 75% of general government expenditure on agriculture and related activities in India was borne by the states. 69% of expenditure on rural development occurs through states. 99% of expenditure on irrigation is incurred by the states. And most importantly, thanks to the recommendations of the 14th Finance Commission, today states receive about 42% of the central divisible pool of taxes. And add to that, thanks to GST, they are getting a share in the services tax. Earlier, they were not getting a share in services tax. Which means that states today have, big money with them. And if you look at the data in the last 5 years, it's very clear that, the transfers from the states, from the center to the states have increased significantly. I mean, the growth of transfers, I mean, have increased significantly. And which means with this money, the states need to be very proactive rather than, I mean, putting everything into the, I mean, shoulder of the center. And which means that they have to, I mean, be proactive. And recently, I mean, our finance minister, Mr. Arun Jaitley, has given a very interesting suggestion. He says that, like GST, I mean, we need to set up federal institutions in different fields like agriculture, health, to coordinate the state and central policies. His point was, if you can successfully implement GST, a complicated reform like GST, through GST Council, why don't, I mean, the states try the same model or mechanism to try out other critical reforms? My point is that center's role in agriculture in India is quite limited. Maybe politically it is convenient for both the governments to fight it out when they want to take some credit or put the blame on each other when there is a problem. But technically speaking, I think the states needs to be very, very proactive. Finally, let me conclude, I mean, my recommendations with one small thought. I think we need to recognize the farmers' contribution in whichever way possible. For example, I mean, why don't we felicitate successful farmers in our locality whenever an occasion comes? For example, during Independence Day celebrations, the schools, colleges, and higher education institutions, they can actually call upon a local farmer or a set of farmers who are successful in their own ways and felicitate in front of the public. And the private corporate sector can do the same thing in their own way. And why don't the central government central government, I mean, introduce a national award for the best farmers and agricultural entrepreneurs, and which could be presented by either the Prime Minister or President. And I know that there are a lot of awards, like, I mean, the ICAR, Indian Council of Agriculture, has an award, National Horticulture Board has its own award, and several state governments has an award for farmers. But when you do it at the national scale, say, I mean, Prime Minister's trophy for the best farmer or agri entrepreneur, actually it can inspire a lot of people, I mean, to venture into farming, and that way you can improve the or enhance the morale of the farmers.
Thanks a lot, sir. It's been a pleasure hosting you today on our show.
Thank you, I mean, EPS and Karthik, I mean, for this opportunity. I hope, I mean, this interaction would help the student community of IIMK and elsewhere to understand some of the important issues facing Indian agriculture today. Thank you.